FM, The Light, and its management. And now, to address the legal concerns of our community, AM 1310 The Light presents Legally Speaking. Here is today's host.
Good morning, everyone. We're glad that you could tune in today. You can also catch our show on YouTube and Facebook. And we're simulcast broadcast on the following station: 1310 AM, 95.1 FM, and 92.7 FM. And today we have our superstar panel, one of the best lawyers in America, Milton Grimes, who famously represented Rodney King. And we have that crack research analyst, master's in tax, Vanita Banks. We just got some outstanding lawyers. But before we get started, to set the stage, I'd like to go over a couple of things that happened. This week was another historic week in the annals of the law. But it started with a tragedy. In Michigan, there was a shooting. Ethan Crumley attempted to murder a whole slew of classmates in his Oxford High School. He took a revolver to school that his father had purchased, and basically the same day, they apparently had a conference because he was off the rails. And later that day, within 2 hours, he ended up just having a shooting where he murdered 4 teenagers and injured another 9. It was just a terrible tragedy. It just was one of those things that just was shocking to all the kids. But the reason I bring it up is bring up the issue of gun owners' liability, and I'll talk about it briefly today, because the parents were both charged with manslaughter. And we now have a proliferation of increase in violent crimes in our community. And one of the things that we need to pay attention to is that you're going to have situations where eventually some of the parents going to be charged. As a practicing lawyer, I've actually been able to collect money in shooting cases sometime against the parents' homeowners insurance. And a lot of people don't realize that there's a liability potentially for gun ownership, and we can get into it later. But in any event, my superstar panel today, how's everybody doing today? Milton and Attorney Banks, how are you guys doing today?
Good morning, Attorney Lee. Doing well.
Attorney Grimes, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, loud and clear.
All right. Thank
Did
you.
either of you follow this story in Michigan, this mass shooting? Now we have so many mass shootings in America until it's hard to keep track of them. But this one was particularly bad in the sense that we have clear evidence that the parents were partially responsible for the tragedy, and based on the circumstances and the criminal charges laid out, the problem they did. And so now, all across America, we have these teenagers and young folks out shooting and murdering people. Now, since the pandemic, it seems like in most of the cities, we have record amount of homicides. And so one of the things that briefly I want to talk about is parental liability based upon the use of weapons. One thing I need to make the audience aware of, I've sued numerous parents for the shooting by their teenage kids. Parental liability in our state, for example, parents are liable for intentional acts of children up until age 18 to a certain amount. And the statute set the amount of like $8,000. However, I've been able to collect substantial sum from the homeowners insurance because we show that the parents themselves have independent liability. For example, when there is a weapon at home, it's not enough to leave it in your drawer. You got to lock it up. And when you lock it up, one of the things that we made clear in one of my cases is that they allowed the bullets they put it in the container, and they had a bunch of bullets in there. So the person took the gun out and shot somebody. So you can have parental liability, but in the criminal case, they impose criminal liability also. Typically, we see civil liability because the standard of proof is much lower. And I'm not sure what it is in California, Milton. Do you guys have similar laws out there in terms of parental liability?
Yes, I would believe so. And it would come under vicarious liability pretty much if they have some knowledge of it and do some act or support or encourage that behavior. I'm not experienced at doing those kind of cases, Nate. I haven't had your experience, and I'm sorry I missed your introduction on the law in this area. So I'm going to kind of tag along with you and Vanita till I can catch on. But I think that parental liability lasts from the cradle to 18. And when you leave home, and if you don't leave home at 18, I think, heard of cases, maybe seen one or two, where that liability continues because the child is still, or the parent is still responsible for the care and upkeep of the child, and the child is still staying at home. So that's my little knowledge on that issue.
Well, Attorney Banks, you had, I mean, in Chicago, I look at the newspaper some days, and on the weekend you see 40, 50 shootings. I mean, it's just terrible tragedy. And in that state, if the prosecutor ever start charging any of the parents with liability for their teenage kids out shooting folks?
I am not aware of that particular issue. I do know that there are no child access prevention laws at the federal level, and there very well should be. And it sounds like, Attorney Lee, that the Indiana statute that you described would be a starting point for consideration. There absolutely needs to be common sense gun legislation in this nation. And when we look at the fact that these parents have been charged with involuntary manslaughter, from the facts and from my perspective, even under common law, they were beyond negligent in this case. One, there is evidence, and of course there will be a very extensive investigation, but evidence suggests that they purchased the gun for their 15-year-old, I believe he is,
Yes.
for his birthday, that he's in class purchasing ammunition, and when observed by the parent, she sends a text back saying, laughing out loud, LOL, just make sure you don't get caught the next time. The next day, or same day, a teacher observes him with a picture of a gun and bullets and a picture of a person bleeding, and informs the parent of their son's actions, and they don't, and that he needs serious counseling, and they do not take him home that day. He goes in the bathroom and comes out and engages in this this tragic carnage of students at the school. And from my perspective, and people are raising shock about, why is, this case being brought against the parents. From what we can see is that their actions are unconscionable and criminal. They buy the gun, they give it to him, they facilitate him in buying, ammunition. And I think that, the facts in this case will determine the outcome.
I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit with you on that, Vanita, in that we as parents want to give our children what they want. And we want to give them those items with responsibility, though. Can you hear me, Nate?
Loud and clear.
Okay.
Yes.
That's buying a car. We give it to them. We know they can't drive that well, and hopefully they only get some little light fender benders in the yard, but not out on the street. So we want them to grow up and be responsible, because we can't hold their hands throughout life. as to a deadly weapon like a gun in an area like Michigan, where there's a lot of hunting, a lot of guns. When you get up in the morning and have toast, you get your gun. I mean, it's just a different culture. I can see as an advocate for the parents that I was just loving my child. And I know there was some risk, but there was no more risk than anything else we do to love our children. I did not encourage that young man. If I'd have known my son was going to kill someone, 4 other students, I would have never given him a gun. But yeah, we had a little laugh with some slips, but that doesn't impute knowledge that he's going to go out and murder someone. I don't know how much information clearly, unequivocally shows beyond a reasonable doubt that I or the parent have knowledge or did anything to aid and abet the child in shooting those 4 kids. Yes, a teacher or counselor said this child needs some counseling because he's acting a little careless and irresponsible. You need to get him in counseling. The counselor didn't say he's threatening to kill someone, that he said he's going to kill someone. They just noticed something he did and attribute that to being youthful and negligent. So I know we can't necessarily give people responsibility because of the outcome of a situation, unfortunately. So that's what I would say for the parents.
Well, before
I
Attorney
agree
Banks
that
respond, before she respond, there was 13 kids shot, 4 were murdered. Not 4 was murdered, but there were 13 shot. But go ahead.
That doesn't give the responsibility to the parent. It doesn't change the causation thing. That doesn't change the vicarious liability. That doesn't change the law on are they actually responsible for those acts. To me, Nate, I'm just saying, I know it was terrible. God knows I know it was terrible. I wouldn't want my kids to be either one of the 4 or the other 13. But we got to follow the law that we have created on responsibility.
And Attorney Grimes, I agree with you and your opening and or closing argument on behalf of the defense of the parents.
Okay,
and
thank
I think,
you.
again, this case is going to be very highly, the case is going to be very, very highly, fact intensive and driven. Again, the parents were put on notice. They knew he was troubled. In fact, I wonder whether the teacher and or the school administrators should have immediately sent him home, notwithstanding what the parents were saying. If I had seen something like that in a classroom, I would have immediately demanded that he be removed from the classroom.
Well, two things. Before we go further. This idea, we're going to talk about it in detail about their liability, but there's also civil liability since 1891 or so, Vosburgh versus Putney. But basically, here's what the contributing factors, I think, Attorney Grimes. The mother wrote a letter to President Trump and stated as follows: as a female and a realtor, thank you for allowing my right to bear arms. Allow me to be protected if I show a home to someone with bad intentions, she wrote in November 2016. Thank you for respecting the Second Amendment. She added the fact that the president was not good at public speaking, and she did not blame him for not making a tax return available. But here's what she wrote that's critical. She said that she had to skip paying her bill to afford a tutor for her son. My son struggles daily, and my teacher tell me they hate teaching it, but they have to. I have to pay for a tutor. Why? Because I can't figure out 4th grade math. I used to be good at math. I can't afford a tutor. In fact, I sacrificed my car insurance to make sure my son gets a good education and hopefully succeed in life. And so she sent this to the President of the United States. And then she goes on and she was complaining about the fact that certain minority students had, like immigrants and things like that, had preferential treatment because they got some type of government assistance, which was probably misplaced. So the problem with this whole case, though, is that the parents actually was participant in what he was doing, according to the prosecutor. They went out, secured the weapon. They had the son present when he bought the gun from the gun store. What wanted to smoke a gun is that the father, after the son had shot all those folks, then he reported his gun stolen or missing, which is a telltale sign now he's trying to cover up his criminal offense. And so I think when all considered, I think what's going to happen, I think that they're going to be convicted of that involuntary manslaughter, and they need to spend a substantial amount of time in jail.
Okay, Nate. Okay. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be laughing, but I understand what you said, but we can't hang her because she supported Trump. That's number one. You got to take that off the table because it has nothing, as much as we want to, with what she said to Trump. And now get that off the table. That is not relevant, Your Honor. My client has a political view that's supported by 49% of American population. She supported a very outstanding president to her. So that's that. So on that part, take that off the table. On the other part, you said you jumped from that to say when they went out and aided and abetted their son, because you gave me that background and that foundation about her political position. But I don't think you can make that leap without some causal connection there that they supported their son and his behavior. Yeah, they went out and bought him a gun, but they didn't buy him a gun to go out and kill students or kill any other people. I would say the dad is a hunter probably, and he bought his son a gun at 15 so he could go hunting with him. And he was going to teach him the do's and don'ts of hunting animals, which I don't agree with. But so all of that is behavior that I'm not in support of personally. But as a lawyer, I would advocate that these are innocent parental actions that has unfortunately caused serious harm to our society. But she hasn't said never in anything you just said, I want my son to go out and kill people that don't understand me and don't agree with me. Just because I lost ability to do fourth grade math is no excuse for making me responsible for killing somebody. So all those are negative things about her, especially the Trump part. I agree. It does not, though, elevate to the height required to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she engaged in activity that caused the death of these children knowingly.
Those would be the arguments, Attorney Grimes. However, I think, again, there's going to be a very, very intensive investigation. And I think if there's any case where, based on the preliminary facts, and we don't want to jump to, as you state, conclusions because the burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. But based on these preliminary facts, it seems that the parents, that there may be evidence to convict the parents on a criminal charge in this case.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Well, let's go to the line real quickly. Our lines are lighting up. Let's take one of the callers real quickly, see what they say. Okay, Ematech, you got a question or comment for us today. And by the way, people don't usually go out with a pistol whooping people to go animal hunt. They use a rifle, but go ahead.
See, you have an advantage on me. I've been traveling and I'm out of state. I don't know all these facts that you know.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, Ematech, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, they normally use. How you doing? Yeah, they normally use a rifle. Normally use a rifle. I was taught to hunt by my dad. We use rifle or shotgun for small game or something like that. A matter of fact, big game, 30-yard sticks or something like that. But for the most part, I want to ask you guys a question. Of course, the Second Amendment arguments are coming up and arguing again. We have Governor DeSantis down in Florida who now wants to mobilize a civilian guard, which would not be under the governance of the federal government. And so I went through and did some research. And Nate, I want to ask you something, Nate. I want you to go on this. We get a call in from people, and some people call in this town, and it's really an attack on intelligence and thought nowadays. People just don't even care to read or try to understand anything. So I made some comments about Chief Justice Berger's comments in '91, citing that the Second Amendment, what the NRA pushed was the biggest fraud on the American public. That, of course, that he, in his interpretation, found it as being for state militias was the right to bear arms. Yet the Heller decision in 2008 the D.C. Versus Heller, that decision, which Clarence Thomas was the majority opinion writer, hadn't written the majority opinion probably since he had been on the court, but he wrote that majority opinion stating that, yes, the Second Amendment did authorize citizens to just own arms. What's your opinion of those two differing views, and do you think that's why we're here right now? Because the genie's out of the bottle, we're not going to put it back in, but those two things are very, very substantial, and I don't think they get talked about enough, especially in our community, which is fighting intelligence and thought and everything like that. So thanks for coming on.
Well, that was a loaded question. Banks or Grimes, you want to respond to?
I thought he addressed that question directly to you, Nate.
Well, here's my response. The statistics I looked at, America's population is about 3% of the world, but yet we're over 50% of private gun ownership. 3% of the people in the world own 51% of all guns held by private individuals. My response is that we just have too many guns in America. And America now become the most violent nation in the world in terms of murder, homicide, things like that. Mass shooting have become like an afterthought. We have them like over 300 per year, these mass murders. So I think that this Second Amendment is one thing, but the Second Amendment doesn't say you go out and start murdering people. I think that we got to get some more controls of these guns. They're out of control.
So we can't hold the writers of the Constitution liable for what people do with these guns that they have. I agree with you wholeheartedly. There are too many guns. I am not excited about guns, but I agree that a person has a right to bear arms, have arms, to protect their home, protect their life, etc. But somewhere we're missing it. Somewhere we missing the responsibility that these gun owners should have when they purchase guns. We live in a civilization that advocates violence, I guess, and somehow we got to one day address that a little more seriously. But I don't know the answer to this problem.
I thought the tipping point would have been when 5- and 6-year-olds were slaughtered in the Sandy Hook case. But we continue to see these school shootings almost so frequently. I believe I read a statistic that there's been 29 this year alone. And this only happens in the United States. And that's the tragedy. We really need, I'm sorry, Attorney Grimes?
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but the Trumpers that this lady support, aren't they saying that was a fabrication or a fantasy? There was no such thing as that shooting. So we got a lot of stuff going on here in this country.
Well,
y'all.
that's misinformation. That's disinformation.
Right.
You're absolutely right. And at the bedrock of it all is just an outright, and that's not the subject of this is not the subject of our discussion today, attack on democracy in so many ways. In this Michigan shooting again, the parents were warned by the school twice. And most school shooters, they obtain guns from family members. And I also read a statistic that 4.5 million teens live in a home with unlocked guns, and that number has increased to 5.4 million during the last 2 years as we've been battling COVID.
Okay, now we have a bunch of
calls. At the very least, guns should be stored where young people don't have access. And of course, we understand the exceptions for hunting, but again, those are typically
so do we have too much freedom, Ms. Banks? Do we have too much freedom? I mean, there's a cost to freedom, isn't there?
Well, I don't know.
Well, I think in this case that Michigan lacks a child gun access prevention law. And again, we need a federal response, and there needs to be some consistency relative to child access to guns.
Okay, let's take a couple calls. Okay, Guy, you have a question or comment for us today?
Yes, holiday greetings to you and your panel.
Yes, sir. What's your question today or comment?
Yeah, where do you go with all of this? Basically, I just consider the word weaponizing, because like that word is out of different areas in terms of society's interest. Weaponizing. The other thing is, in the country, when U.S. Congress was debating whether or not to legalize automatic or semi-automatic weapons, big controversy about it, but ultimately it passed. Is anybody keeping profile? Questions come up as a result of passage of such legislation. In other words, is anybody keeping all these mass shootings detriment our society cause? Because we really want to have a benefit to society rather than a detriment. Records and found that you went down the path the wrong way, or the wrong path back. In other words, what is the profile since automatic weapons in particular? Somebody keeping a track of that?
Well, to answer your question, short answer, yes. You can't go on any website and not see the number of mass shootings in America. So yeah, it's tracked. And there may be what amount to almost a mass shooting every day in America now. It's just out of control. Okay, Naomi, you have a question for us. Hello, next caller.
Question. I do have a comment, and a good morning to you and your panel. I thought long and hard about this regarding and relating to guns and weapons in America. When your right to bear arms impedes upon my right to be safe and in the country that is my own, then we have a problem. I don't want to address this issue about the guns. This is how the United States has conquered every country, including the continent of Africa, with weaponry. And we are just following a script. The guns that they use to come in and take over Africa are now in the hands of our children, and our children are using these guns against one another. And we have a real problem. Why they don't want to give up guns, and I don't want to sound any kind of way other than factual, is because of this whole revolt thing, this militia thing, protect the country type of thing, and all of that is just hogwash. Waiting for another civil war and all these kind of things, and they want to make sure they have to fight. Who are they wanting to fight? There you go. That's the question. Right now, our children.
Well, we'll start with Attorney Banks to respond to that. I know what Attorney Grimes started off on a diatribe about this.
September the 5th, 2021. Very personal to me. These guns, we need to do something about them. But we're not, because of this whole thing about another civil war. But and it's not our war. Yeah, because we're too busy killing each other. And thank you for taking my comment. Hope we can resolve this.
That was a loaded question. Start with Attorney Banks, and then we'll go to Attorney Grimes to respond also.
Well, there's a lot to unpack in the callers' questions and concerns, but from my perspective, we need to find a way to, through legislation, initially, to hold gun owners accountable for their the proper storage of their weapons. We need common sense gun legislation. This only happens in the United States. We're the only high-income country that has these types of mass shootings, almost as Attorney Lee stated, on a daily basis. Almost estimated 29 school shootings this year alone. But yet we choose to do nothing. And that's the problem.
Well, you finished, Vanita?
Yes.
Okay. Well, Nate, we've been having mass shootings for a long time, ever since I've been a lawyer. I remember one in Orange County back in the 70s from Fullerton College. We've been having them, and it's the same issue. People using guns that they either legally got or illegally got to kill other people in masses. That shooting of the guy in Las Vegas a couple of years ago, what did he kill? 80 some people? So this is not a new problem. We have a value system in this country that a lot of countries try to copy. We have the gun manufacturers, their lobbyists keep the politicians in line, and they keeping it legal. They make a lot of money off of the sale of guns throughout the world. It's a money-making industry. They could care less how many people, they meaning the profiteers and the people who make the money. They don't care how many lives are lost by people killing innocent people. So it's a deep problem. What is our value system that allowed this to happen continually? And we can't get the laws that Vanita is pleading about to take effect or be implemented. Maybe the value system is about money. That's why things don't change over the decades that I've been looking at it. So we get these shootings and we bury these kids, and a month from now, we go on about our business. Buying another new gun.
Again.
Yeah, buying another new gun. It's my manhood. It's my phallic symbol. It's, this is me. I'm a bigger man now because I got a bigger gun. And I know some people like that. And there are some responsible people too that I know that own guns and know how to use them, go to training every year with them. I've been invited a couple of times by a friend of mine because of guns ownership. So it's I don't know. It seems to be a value system. We are cowboys. We're old West. That's our mentality. So I'm sorry for these parents, and I forbid that it never happens to me or someone I love. But look like we're stuck with this thing for a while because it sure no indication that it's going to change. So we get up here on these radio and TV programs and we raise a little hell, kick a little dust, and say, shucks, we're going to do something to stop this until the next one happens. That's what I've seen.
Well, real quickly, we'll take one more call and then we're going to switch to the abortion issue. Okay, Mr. Williams, you have a question or comment for us today, sir?
How you doing, Mr. Lee?
I'm doing great.
I was just thinking,
Hey, Ms. Williams, you went silent. I can't hear you, sir. Go ahead.
All of the vets.
I can't hear anything, Nate.
I can't hear him. Can you speak up a little bit?
Yes, I was talking about.
He's going in and out.
I don't hear
Yeah, we're
any.
losing him. Well, we may have to come back to him. We have to switch gears real quickly because we're going to run out of time. And there was a monumental decision that's pending before the U.S. Supreme Court that dealt with the Mississippi abortion law that basically says that they will ban abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy. And that will be a decision that will be what tantamount to a reversal of Roe versus Wade of 1973 decision. In the Roe case, the court stated that the states could not ban abortion before fetal viability, the point at which the fetus can survive outside the womb. At that time, it was 28 weeks at that time because of improvement in medical technology. Today is around 22 to 24 weeks. Roe also established a framework to govern abortion regulation based on the trimesters of pregnancy. In the first trimester, it allowed almost no regulation. In the second, it allowed regulations to protect women's health. In the third, it allowed states to ban abortion so long as exception was made to protect the life and health of the mother. And that was a Roe decision. And now, Mississippi law, when they filed their brief in the Supreme Court, the lawyers originally stated they did not intend to overturn Roe, but it turns out that's exactly what they're trying to do. Attorney Banks, I know you're on top of this issue. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that this is the most direct challenge to Roe versus Wade in almost 3 decades. That this Mississippi challenge is being heard by a conservative U.S. Supreme Court with 3 Trump appointees. It's the Dobbs versus Women's Health case. And while initially positioned as not attempting to reverse Roe versus Wade, many of the arguments were directed exactly toward that end. And it's interesting to hear some of the questions of the judges. For example, Justice Amy Barrett posed the question as to whether or not the safe haven laws, which allow a parent to abdicate all their parental rights at birth by dropping their child off at a safe location without any prospect of liability. She also referenced whether or not an infringement on the body, how was an infringement on the body, like a mandated vaccine, any different? And so this case is about liberty, it's about constitutional liberty, and it's about stare decisis, which is a legal term, but a respect for precedent. Roe versus Wade has been the law for almost 50 years. It was decided in 1973, a 7-2 decision. Justice Thurgood Marshall was on the court that decided Roe versus Wade. Justice Thomas asked, what is exactly the right that we're talking about here? He stated that with respect to gun ownership, that, we know about the Second Amendment, but what actually is the constitutional right that is being advocated here and in Roe versus Wade? And the court in Roe versus Wade determined that the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment protects against any state action the right to privacy, and a woman's right to choose to have an abortion falls within that right to privacy, and that any state law that prohibits abortion without respect to the stage of pregnancy. As Attorney Lee pointed out, those three stages relative to the trimesters, first, second, or third, that any state law that prohibits abortion without respect to the stage of pregnancy violates that right of privacy that they found existing in the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment.
Well said, Vanita. You know, it's not a constitutional amendment, but it is a well-set law of over 50 years, or close to 50 years. And I think Justice Sotomayor, I read something in the last couple of days, and I can't say where I read it. She asked the question, what are we to do every time there is a political party in power or one wanting to come to power? We're going to change the right of a woman to have control over her body, like a flag blowing in the wind or something. This right should be recognized and somehow put in stone. I don't know how you can do that in the law, but it seems as though every election year or come every 4 years, some right-wing person or party is attacking a woman's right to control her body because it's a hot issue. So I don't know when we're going to get to the point of accepting that as her right, a woman's right. Maybe when we get to the point of accepting a woman as a full citizen.
Well, what was disturbing to me was some of the comments the judges were making during the hearing. It was disturbing in terms of, it just seemed like archaic when one of the justices suggested that the woman have the baby and that you drop the baby off to one of these safe houses after delivery. Right. I'm thinking, when I was listening to that, I say, in America, you expect some modicum of intelligence. So what is the point of what she was saying? Force the woman to have the baby and then force the mother to give the baby away to some unknown stranger in a world whereby the child may just die. But it just bothered me in terms of their interpretation. I think that elections have significant consequences. And we saw what happened when they elected this President Trump, who then put 3 judges on the Supreme Court. And these judges now are not just turning back the rights of women, but they're turning rights of minorities in civil rights cases. So in police misconduct, we saw that they have not done anything progressive in terms of issue of qualified immunity. So it's not just this issue alone. When they say conservative, a lot of people say, well, it's just the women, but it's not just women. It's going to be in your community. If a police officer shoot another Black male, they say qualified immunity. This whole situation is out of control. And I think that this decision will be a bellwether decision in the sense that it may completely change the way people think about our Supreme Court. It's clear to me that our Supreme Court is becoming much too political.
I agree with that. And as I think about the Supreme Court, at least over my lifetime, I believe that at this juncture is the most political that I've seen the Supreme Court. And Justice Sotomayor's words were so haunting when she stated, will this institution survive the stench?
Right.
Powerful words coming from Justice Sotomayor. And Justice Amy Barrett's comments, are they pro-life? They don't seem to be pro-life. They seem to be more pro-birth, So she has 7 children, and 2 of which are adopted. But this case is scheduled to be decided by June of next year. And Justice Roberts asked the question as to whether 15 weeks would be a sufficient time frame. So we're looking at least half of the states, if not more, have abortion laws. We're familiar with the Texas law, which would prohibit abortions after 6 weeks, I believe. And so Mississippi has only one abortion clinic in the state. Currently, women are traveling miles and miles in order to obtain, health care. In Mississippi has one of the highest, if not the highest, mortality birth rates in the nation. And we know that regardless of economic status, women of color, and particularly African American women, the high mortality of death, of birth rate is disproportionate and has a disproportionate impact on women of color.
Well, real quickly, we'll go to the line and take Rose. She has a question or comment about this issue. Rose, what's your question or comment about this abortion issue?
The question is, why are we talking about abortion?
Hey, Rose, you're on the air now. Could you speak up, please?
Why are we? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, well, I don't understand. I'm 89 years old. I got caught in that trip of not knowing what sex, because older men judged on me when I was in Mississippi. But what I want to understand is, now that everyone knows why you need so many abortions, why are we not, our girls and boys, all for the abortion is? Why do we not spend time teaching, educating, and letting them know what's available to prevent this abortion if they just got to have sex? But teach them what sex is before you go into it, and that no matter what you think, it may be you, every time you go have sex with a boy, a man, whatever, you are going into the possibility of getting pregnant. Now, if you don't want to get pregnant, you should not indulge yourself in that activity. And I don't understand why we go year after year. I've been going all these years after I got there. We were afraid to tell our mother. But I don't understand why we are fighting with the government, somebody about abortion. If you have that much money, give women the medicine to prevent having abortion, getting pregnant, and I'm about getting pregnant, and teach these young men that they are not supposed to stalk girls or try to fool them into thinking they want them and having sex. It's a whole lot more to go along with it, but educated people.
Well, Attorney Banks, Rose is 89 years old. She makes a lot of points. She said that why don't we educate these young people about sex so they don't get pregnant? What do you think?
I think she's absolutely correct that sex education is critical as well.
Yeah, I agree with Rose. I mean, we should educate our youth not to get pregnant and it's not to spread disease process. I agree with her. That's some old school knowledge. And, 89 years young, she has a right to make a profound statement like that.
Absolutely.
But,
and that's what I was taught as well.
Okay. We'll take one last caller because we're about out of time. Jim, do you have a question about this abortion issue?
Hello?
Yes, Jim. Short and simple. What's your question?
Hello. No, I didn't have a question. I wanted to make a statement that anybody that thinks of abortion is a woman's right, they need to go and go to the research library and read about the Negro Project. It was Margaret Singer's first company to sterilize black men without their permission. They put her butt in jail in Mississippi, and when she got out of jail, she went to Europe and became Hitler's best student. Came back to the States, and she started another company called the Mississippi Appendectomy. They tried to soothe the black women. They couldn't have babies. And in 1932, the Mississippi Appendectomy and the Negro Project became Planned Parenthood. It was the black race. It had nothing to do with a woman's reproductive rights.
Well, it looked like, Jim, they should have had you on that Supreme Court case making those arguments, because I didn't hear the lawyers for the government make any arguments like that. I think you make some good points, but that wasn't argued before the Supreme Court, unfortunately. They did not give the historical context of the adverse Mississippi laws. And I think that what you're saying is relevant, and they should have brought that up. But in any event, one final comment for our distinguished panel before we close today. First, with Attorney Banks, short and simple. What's the good points for today, Counselor?
Well, I'm going to change the topic altogether and just advise our callers to be aware, very critically aware and focused on this new Omicron variant, and to please be safe over the holidays. Make sure you get your vaccine and your booster as well. Wear a mask if inside and outside. And again, stay safe during this holiday season.
Attorney Grimes?
Well, I believe we have a right to own guns. We have a greater responsibility to make sure that people who own them know how to use them and for what to use them for. Hopefully we'll get to that stage in our life one day, but we're not there yet, and it probably won't happen in my lifetime. So take care, everybody.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for all our callers today, and especially our special guest panel. And of course, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for listening and supporting our show each week. Next week, we will have another legal issues of the day that's relevant. The two hottest issues we discussed, the abortion Supreme Court case and the mass shooting. Thank you for listening today. May God bless and keep you, and stay safe until we talk again. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a great week.